Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. Thank you for joining us. This is the first keynote lecture for 2025 of the Public Space Academy. My best wishes also for a very successful and fruitful new year in regard of public space research, projects, implementation activities, and initiatives. I am Luisa Bravo, the founder and director of the Public Space Academy. We're very happy to start this new season of keynote lectures because those are moments where we actually can interact with key researchers, practitioners, and urban innovators who are very active in the field of urban design and public space. So this is a key moment for our learning activities at the Public Space Academy. I would like to invite Via to also welcome our audience. Via is the communication officer of the Public Space Academy, and probably you already saw her in our previous activities. And for those of you who were attending the training session at the World Urban Forum in Cairo in November, we met in person.
Yes, hello everybody. Yeah, as Luisa said, Happy New Year, and hopefully this is going to be another rich year for the Academy and for us learning together through these great experiences. I hope everybody enjoys the lecture today. I think it will be very inspiring.
Yes, exactly. In fact, today for our keynote lecture, we are very happy to have with us Stephen Willacy, a leading international architect, urban design practitioners, and academic. Stephen is also a member of the steering committee of the Public Space Academy. Is also an honorary professor at the University of Dundee in Scotland, and is the former chief city architect in Aarhus, Denmark's second largest city. So without any further delay, I would like to invite Stephen to join us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen, for joining us.
It's a great pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to it.
So we leave the floor to Stephen, and we encourage participation of the audience with comments and questions that we will discuss at the end of Stephen's lecture. So the floor is yours.
Can you get the presentation? There we are. This is reimagining public space, and I have quite a few slides, so I'll probably go through quite rapidly. So I'm based in Aarhus, that's where the arrow is, in Denmark, the second largest city. It's just to put it in context, so if we have got viewers from different parts of the world, they can see where we are. This is a harbour town on the eastern coast of Denmark, and this is just along the beach, very close to the city centre. We're 365,000 citizens in Aarhus. And this last year, we were ranked the happiest city in the world. Not a lot of people know this, but it was something we're quite thrilled about. And I thought it would be quite for the viewers to see that we're actually known for something at least. We're growing rapidly, roughly 6,500 citizens annually at the moment, which does pressurize the way we look at our towns and cities and the way we can incorporate them into our urban realm. Aarhus was European Capital of Culture in 2017, and which was quite a big event for us in this community we have. But we worked across the whole of central Jutland with 19 different local councils, and we have in Aarhus some quite iconic museums, and this is Aarhus Museum. And you can see in the bottom the architects, and Olaf Eliasson is the design of your rainbow panorama on the top. And you have this wonderful psychedelic view as you wander around the rainbow of the city, and it's quite something, quite magical. Just south of Aarhus, we have this beautiful museum, Moskva Museum, in the landscape, and we have this very famous university campus by these different architects, Sif Müller, Kai Fiske, Paul Stinkborg, in the center of Aarhus, with roughly 50,000 students. So all these different cultural buildings has meant we have a national stamp during the European Capital of Culture, and we're very proud of this. We're also a renowned center for business, with lots of different business clusters. We are the world's windmill capital in Aarhus, with research and development for nearly all the windmill companies. And it's also an important harbour town, of course. We have agro-foods park, we've got lots of different design and robotic studies and things like this going on in the university itself. But of course, when we talk about our city, the way it's growing, and also how can we communicate with each other, the Sustainable Development Goals has become quite an important tool. So we're roughly speaking the same language with each other. And I think it's important that we bear this in mind as the whole paradigm of putting people first when we talk about making our cities. So we've often asked this question, which is something we've borrowed from Jan Gehl. You know, ask the question about look at the city life before look at the urban spaces, and then we can look at the design of the buildings. Obviously, it's not linear, it's spiral back and forth. But for many years, it's been a case of designing buildings and there's some space left over. And I'll return to this theme as we go along. I often show this slide to illustrate the importance of public transport and the challenges we're facing about urban sprawl. This has a massive impact upon the way we look at our public realm and the way we design it. The two upper examples illustrate that 8 and 12% of public transport in the two large cities was cities with roughly the same population at the time, London and Berlin. And you could also take Barcelona as good examples where there's a large quantity of public transport, which allows you can make a much more compact development. So this is just an image of Aarhus from just post-war. The dark area illustrates the footprint at the time, and then 2000, the actual footprint, because we built all these single-family homes, which is very popular, and also the functional separated planning, where we have social housing along the outskirts of the town, along the ring road, and also industrial areas on the outskirts. The yellow areas I'll come on to are areas which have like polycentric development taking place as we've been planning forward. So this chart, you'll have an opportunity to peruse this in more detail after the talk when it's uploaded. The comparison between smart growth and sprawl. And some people say it's kind of a no-brainer, but there's a lot of discussion about people would like to live in single-family homes, but the idea of densification is important, and how we manage, for example, using themes like transport-orientated development, where you have public transport as a kind of a guiding force to allow larger developments to take place around station areas, hubs, transport hubs. I'll return to this shortly. So managing the growth, the image on the left illustrates the way planning has been post-war, and now we're trying to convince ourselves or work closely with the idea of mixing these different activities, work, recreation, living, and so you can make it more walkable and accessible, cyclable. We like to work with this, and making more vibrant, sustainable neighborhoods. Some people call it 15 or 20-minute communities. Others, I'll show it later, we're also discussing the idea of 5-minute communities where everything's very accessible. So when we talk about this, the comparison, the importance of transport, the infrastructure, it's often a question of space. And this is just in front of our beautiful town hall designed by Anne Jacobsen. There's 80 people here, and you can see the bunch of people and how 80 cars fills the roads, how the bus, the shorter amount of asphalt used, and also the bicycles. It's an important illustration, but a lot of people like to still use the vehicle, and families often have more than one car. And of course, we talk about smart mobility in many different forms: electrical e-bikes, e-scooters, shared cars, autonomous cars. But I mean, it's the same amount of space required. And we may think, well, we're going in the right direction, especially in terms of clean environmental air, the challenge of CO2 and things, but it still takes up quite a lot of space. And this is something which is a challenge we're facing. There are many other factors in our agenda when we talk about the question of space. We want to make it more people-centric and friendly, active transport, cycle lanes, make more livability, people-friendly spaces, more green, tree reduction, heat islands, obviously a healthy environment, and of course, trying to adapt to the climate change challenges we're facing, and making water visible in swales and channels. And of course, people would like to have cars in their neighborhood close by. But there's also a lot of infrastructure underground, which makes it difficult to plant trees on top. And they also have to be serviced. So all these different things, what gives? How do we make the mix work? The other discussion is the quality of the urban realm. These are illustrations from Leon Cryer from his booklet, The Architectural Community. And these are very key illustrations. I've used them quite a lot to illustrate the challenges we've been facing. And you can see here from these illustrations from typical examples. The one on the left is from the old historical heart of Copenhagen, where there's too little public space. And this illustration, the next one is one in Gellerup Park in Aarhus, where there's a lot of public space. And then there's too much semi-public space. And this is, I just found this image from Ørsted in Copenhagen, but I couldn't find a decent image in Aarhus. But this is just some examples. Whilst the one on the right-hand side, it's a project I'd like to illustrate at the end of this talk, towards the end. So why show this Jacques Tati playtime image? And I find it quite amusing. It's just that this lady is in the travel agency planning on going on holiday, and all these different destinations, whether in USA, Hawaii, Mexico, or Stockholm, all the buildings are the same. It's the modernist idiom. And I'd like to make this kind of abrupt comparison between the readable and recognizable city from those early illustrations and the showed previously, and the indistinct city and the blurred boundaries between public and private areas. You can see these with the modernist typical housing scheme from around the 60s and 70s. And it's really important to remind ourselves of these ideas which are coming into play more and more, I think, because we're having to repair upon these ideas which have caused some challenges for us. One of my icons in urban planning, I think, is these ideas developed by Hermann Hertzberger and many other architects, the discussion relating to thresholds. I think it's very important when we distinguish between the idea of public and semi-public areas. This is the scheme I mentioned earlier from Gellerup. This is as it looked in the original case in the 70s. And this is just recently taken. How we split up the different functions, the parking at ground floor level, very unfriendly corridors on ground floor level, semi-public areas at the access balcony. And we invested lots of money in this housing association, Brabant Housing Association, where we removed this deck and tried to introduce the thresholds of making accessible good spaces with demarcated in semi-private areas to make it more livable. And it's been very successful, I think, so far. Similarly, the large, indiscreet, very difficult area, urban park has been altered by these architects, SLA architects and effect architects, and the integration of public facilities in this massive park, and also bringing all the urban drainage, the surface drainage, into this lake at the bottom of the picture. And it's been a very important, very successful project. The pathway is very meandering to reduce the possibility of people driving on scooters and things like this, and make it more accessible. And there's many different types of spaces, also for different ethnic groups, different men, women, and different users. So it's been really worked together with the local community how to integrate these different types of uses into this large space. Another beautiful example is this one in Waben in Freiburg, where Professor Wolf Danzig worked with a lot of people, developing 2 new towns, polycentric towns on the outskirts, but linked together with the inner city by public transport. And this is something we've looked at very closely. And it's a beautiful example of how they've managed to think holistically, keeping the density at reasonable level, but also integrating all the climate challenges into surface drainage in the area. Similarly here, making beautiful small streets. I like this signpost where you have people walking. There's a car, possibility to drive in and deposit your shopping, or if you have to deliver children or something like this. But there's kids playing football, and there's a cycle there. And it's taking care. And there's very few cars in the area. The car parking is in parking barns on the outside of the edges of the community. So there's very little need to drive into the centre. And it's important to remember, they've also incurred quite a large expense on parking spaces. So a lot of people decide to use the public transport. So relationship to climate change, this is a very interesting project in Copenhagen, which is, it was formerly a roundabout, and it's become a climate quarter where all the water is brought from this district into the central area. And it's completely transformed by bringing lots of different types of flora and fauna into the area and making basins. When there's heavy downfalls and inclement weather, they'd be just absorb the water, and without having it to go into the drainage system or reducing the speed of it accessing the drainage system, so that the whole underground infrastructure is not as heavily challenged as it used to be. We have one in Aarhus. This is an area just not far from the center of Aarhus. Remove the big trees here, but all the water is brought into these channels and basins, which reduce the speed at which the water is coming into the drainage system and into the bay. And you can see this is quite impressive, the way the challenge of facing the inclement weather and the cloudburst situations. One of the basins is multifunctional in terms of use. Here we have sports activities. And obviously, when it's flooded, you can't use it for these activities, but they're not flooded for very long, and they're easily cleaned. Similarly, Aarhus, we had this. Aarhus is on a river called Aar Boulevarden here back in the 80s and 90s. This is one of the main arteries into the city harbour area. And during the 90s, actually, the politicians and the city architect at the time made a plan to open it up again. So the culvert was removed and made accessible. There was a lot of discussions about, what would happen if you did this. And it's proven very successful. This is one of the most popular urban spaces in town. The shops, people worried about the price of property and things, but they've boomed. All the ground floor areas here are cafes and restaurants. It's a very popular area, and proved very successful. And it doesn't have to be big things. These are small pocket seating areas along the river. A similar example in Malmö, Boa 01 in Malmö Sted. And this is a fantastic scheme with lots of different activities and different types of housing and different urban areas, spaces, the beautiful thing about the project is you don't really notice the vehicles at all. They're parking integrated into the plan, but I like these small channels along the edges of the buildings where the surface water is brought in, and you can hear the water trickling along when you're walking around. It's a very nice, humane scale about this scheme. Similarly here, the incorporation of planting, also you can see on the terraces, the roof level, some low scale here, on the outer scale much taller, but you can see also the integration of planting on the northern side, so they can actually get the sun and the shade on that side. It makes it very, very user friendly, I think. So in Aarhus, we have an industrial harbour, which has been on the go for roughly 25 years now, actually. And it's been transformed to this, a big international competition back in the 1990s, and which formed the basis for this plan. You can see this, the pier in the middle here, they've been removed to make a large basin area, and two very important public buildings, Dock 1, the library, and the university in Evites on the northern side here, and all the public facilities joined together after removing all the industrial buildings. Another view of this from above. You can see the container harbour further afield. But this you could see is how it looked. It was quite a dangerous area, actually, a lot of traffic. The main street along the harbour front was like 5 lanes, and there were around this, one of the most beautiful buildings in town was just a roundabout at the time. This is where it looked back just around about 2010, with a railway line running through the whole area, fenced off. You couldn't walk across this area. And then in the introduction of a light railway system, the removal of the fence, removal of 2 lanes, and making it into a sort of more people-centric area where it's shared space on the harbour front now. It's almost a little piece of Venice where there's no curbs. It's become very friendly, and it's designed by Schmidt Hammer Lassen together with the landscape architect Christine Jensen. So Dock 1 is a library and public domain, a democratic space. On the first floor level, it's 2,500 square meters of covered area. The roof covers it, and a large play area. There's no traffic here, so children can run freely with lots of different types of play area, inspired by the world's geography and the flora and fauna and nature. The design is by Munstrom and is built on this first floor level with different characters of space. But when you talk about reimagining the urban realm, I think it's really important to think of this in terms of making it people-centric, where children especially, feel safe and secure, and the parents can be more relaxed. I've had several children. I've got grandchildren, so I really understand the need for these types of spaces. And it does rain in Denmark, so the idea of having covered public space is very popular. I know there's running clubs in Aarhus. During the inclement weather, they run around and up and down the staircases and under the covered spaces here, doing laps. There's also dancing groups that meet here regularly, the Ghetto Blaster. So it's quite multifunctional. And we have this one on the harbour front too, this beautiful piece of water art by Jeppe Hein, the artist, called Endless Connection. And this whole idea of the urban floor is really significant, I think, because this one in front of the Pompidou Centre is one of those examples I suddenly became aware of the big potential of using the floor itself, the urban grain. This one is in Aarhus, transformation of an existing park so it can absorb cloudbursts, but it's used by many different types of users. We have many students here, but there could also be different types of age groups, ethnic groups, different nationalities using the different space here. This one is Lincoln Inn Fields in London, the square. Obviously, it's one of these squares that's closed down in the evenings, but it's a breakout space and it's a common area, which is very popular, especially during the summer months. But I know during the winter months and autumn, if it's not raining, it's very popular to go out and wander around here. And of course, this beautiful one in Siena, very inspiring. This whole idea of congregating, inclusive areas, many different types of people using it, feeling comfortable and safe. We have to work with this more and more, especially when we're pressured in the urban realm. These examples where the buildings have integrated seating are just fantastic. This is from Florence. I was there 2 years ago and I just couldn't get I just kept bumping into these seating areas and just felt like sitting there. And obviously when it's very hot, the shading is wonderful. I studied at the London School of Economics and I did a Master of Science in Cities. And this is one of the buildings that was being built at the time by Grafton Architects. And this was a former street, become a kind of shared space, obviously for fire, accessible fire, of course. But the architects have integrated a beautiful bench along the facade and made it the surface material, bringing almost like in Venice again, no curbs, but demarcating obviously if there's a need for people to drive. But it's green as well, it's soft. From the other side, you can see it's sloping site, so lower bench at this end. And you can see that through the section of the building, the urban realm runs through the building. It's accessible. You can wander through it and look up through the building itself. And the common areas are the areas in red. So there's 2 floors above which are accessible around by a beautiful staircase. And I love the landscaping of this to explain this possibility. And of course, the sports hall underneath. And this seating area on the inside, on the other side of the wall. It's very soft leather seat here. So this is a wonderful quote, I think, when we talk about the urban realm and building itself regarding generosity. Every project needs some invention, needs something that is not in the brief. Architecture commissions for clients or patrons to make building another ingredient which we as profession have to secretly find. It's finding the ingredient that's not in the function of the requirements, but is something else. And that's the challenge. This is Yvonne Farrell from Grafton Architects. Beautiful. And another one by a Danish journalist and also for a local, a national newspaper and author of many books. One of them called The Generous Town. But you can go through these separately. But I think one of them is every time the city changes, it should get better than it was. Successful architecture imparts something the city did not have before. And I like this. And I said, what does your project give back to the city? And I think this is something we have to bear in mind all the time, that it's something we're actually creating for the general public. A little insertion in the urban realm is a small town with 10,000 people, a railway station in Rue, just on, I think 30 kilometers from Aarhus. But this is built as a covered area, which can be used for many different activities, markets, any use, you can book it. But this is just a generosity. It's giving something back to the general community. It's very warm, it's very friendly. And because we have inclement weather, it's a nice place to chill. So the former the former container harbor on the right out in the bay, we have this beautiful harbour front along Basin 7, where had the fortunate sponsor of a Saling Fountain to build this basin. And I must say it's been a magical success. And when we talk about the urban floor, here you can see timber floor, obviously near the basin here. And along the edge of the building site, the council, together with the developer, I built this idea of, whilst we're waiting, we make a livable building site fence. So these containers and different activities were developed with very cheap rents, encouraging people to use this space whilst the projects were being built. And it became a fantastic destination in itself, and very quirky and very interesting compared with the very polished newer developments in the background. This is a similar case here in Copenhagen. So on the bay, with the harbour front there too. This is just a typical summer's day in Aarhus, on top of a shopping mall, a selling shopping centre. The company here asked Wamble and Henning Lassen Architects to redesign the roof space so it become public accessible. And this is something that's going to take place more and more, I believe. The idea of using as much space as possible in the urban realm on the roof space, the roofscape. And it's become so popular that at a second stage, it's a fantastic destination. You can see in the background your rainbow panorama on the skyline and Anne Jacobsen's town hall. You can see how central it is. Integration of art and seating. Children here, Jeppeheim. And obviously, it's lots of different viewing platforms and possibilities here. But you can see the urban realm can reach up to the skies and become accessible, taking in the skyscape and the extended views. Another example is this next to the new architect school in Aarhus, designed by 3XN and EN Architects, bringing the general public onto the roof. It's not accessible for wheelchair users, but there's possibility of coming up to certain parts of it, but not on the required level, as is often the case. Another case, a multi-use, is the different times of day. This is a new school that was built, was I think 7-8 years ago now. But the idea of using all the different surfaces so the classes can actually have breakout spaces on the roofs, protected from outside. Here you can say there's a basketball and handball and football and just general breakout spaces adjacent to the classrooms. Again, here there's a kindergarten integrated in the school with play areas involved, which are accessible during the weekends as well and at night time. This is an image I started with, of course. It's the bike shed roof and also waste disposal underneath this space. It's south-facing roof, which has become accessible to sit on. This is on a Saturday when there's a local market taking place adjacent to this. It's a very popular place to meet. Another example of using the roof space, this is a housing scheme on Aarhus where it's a social housing scheme, which is on each staircase elevator tower inside the buildings, they have winter gardens on the roof space. And they're proving very popular with the residents. So they can also have extended views across the harbour area. And each staircase area has a budget to landscape and do the planting and buy furniture. Another very exciting example of a parking building or a parking barn, often referred to in the UK, is in the northern harbour of Copenhagen, designed by Architects, where it's fully green, but that staircase itself has got a timer on it, so you can actually time the speed it takes to run up it. And you've got these sports facilities and fitness area on the roof. There's some boxes there where the fitness clubs and societies have keys to access the different weights and different tools and things that they can use to train with. So back to this with the idea of transport-orientated development, where densification can take place along, for example, those yellow areas, those yellow extended ellipses, where the public transport for light railway corridors have been designed. The red one on the right there is one which is currently being planned at the moment to light railway and maybe combined with BRT. But all those industrial brownfield sites, the red ones on the left, many of them are integrated into these transport corridors. And it's been a very successful approach to densification. And these are many of the different, I'm sorry about the line at the bottom here, but the TOD policy goals in relationship to socioeconomic, social, environmental, and social cultural are very significant. And the idea of making the city more accessible to more people at all times of day. So this idea of being able to densify and use the station, the local stations, as possibility to identify, and using bicycle areas or distances as an important driver. And we find that lots of property ground areas are becoming more expensive because developers are buying them and intensifying these areas, encouraging growth around them. So hopefully less people have the need for cars, or the reduction from 2 cars to at least maximum 1. And this is something which has been monitored, I think. It's an attractive thing to make cycling popular, making a nice cycling accommodation near the stations. This is one at the Dock 1 library there, next to the light railway stop underneath the library. And also there's roughly 996 parking spaces fully automated in the building. And this is a non-space before, but after the Magic Mushrooms artwork was introduced, it's become a much more positive place, designed by the artists Michael Elmgren and Ingvar Klauset. You can see people waiting with a cot. So cycling, this is also very popular in Aarhus. Maybe not as popular as in Copenhagen, because Aarhus is quite hilly. But this picture on the left is one in Copenhagen. There's quite big cycle paths there. And we've had the challenge facing us is finding parking for the cyclists. And at the same time, trying to manage the speed in which cyclists go through the town. This one is in the old historical part of Aarhus. And we've actually they've come up the idea of making summer reduced speed streets. So this area here, which is very, very popular, people are allowed to drive through the area, but they have to reduce the speed to 15 kilometers an hour. So it's a very important thing. So during the summer period, it's become very popular as a place to be. And because of that, 2 streets which have been summer streets will become permanent areas, which are reducing the speed of cycling through it by cobblestones. By introducing cobblestones, it means that the speed of the cyclist is reduced. At the same time, it's very symptomatic with the old historical part of town, which is covered in cobblestones. So it's extending the historical grain of the city into these smaller streets. So Pier 3 in Aarhus is an area which is going to be developed now. Here you can see the picture on the left, illustrating the Aarhus on the right out in the bay, while Pier 3 is this one here, where you've got the arrows on the right. This is designed by Sled Architects, Cobe Architects, and a firm called Brick, who working with how to create urban life in these future developments. And these are some really beautiful diagrams. They've just been made public in a public citizen engagement meeting. And it's very nice to share the possibilities, because I showed you earlier the quality of the urban realm in that pitch, the illustrations from Leon Cryer. This is the example I'd like to share with you, because we're talking about this getting the mix right, but making good urban spaces. The buildings are, I think, the maximum 6 stories high or something like this, which is the normal height in Aarhus for the maximum height for typical housing in the older part of town. But the whole idea of integrating the greenery into the town, you can see some of the images you recognize from, I've shown the parking building from Copenhagen. So this mix is very important. The heritage, can we use some of the existing buildings? Of course. This is an important driver now in terms of CO2 and life cycle analysis. So this is, some of these illustrations are prioritized, but they're all thought together, like this one, the harbour edges, the focus on proximity to the water, how the different areas have different characters, water-related activities, and building bridges across to the different piers. And you can see this is very early work, and it's not cast in stone yet, but it's just a very good starting point for the discussion which is taking place. I think it's very Very good start. And all these different layers here about the neighborhood connections, the varying routes, the commercial street, a new commercial street which is being planned, bridges across, the shared solutions connecting to the inner city. And similarly here, you know, this whole idea of making a water district, integrating water into the neighborhoods with water cleaning areas, swales and visible channels, as I illustrated from places like Freiburg and Cambridge, incidentally, and also making it visible in terms of learning, making people aware of the challenges we're facing, and learning about the whole sustainable agenda in terms of tidal heights and things. City life and the livability, of course, is a very important point for, I know, the politicians. It's a cardinal point. And also the whole idea that minimum 25% of the housing will be social housing, housing associations, student housing, different types of citizens. Yeah, different types of urban spaces, water spaces, winding streets, squares, pocket parks, and so on. All these different squares and typologies are coming into play. This is going to be fantastic. I know it is. So finally, I'd just like to go through something in terms when we talk about reimagining the public spaces. Tactical urbanism and prototyping is something I'm very keen about. This is an example from like 15 years ago from Aarhus, where Schmidt Hammer Landscape Architects worked with the City Festival Week and introduced this forest for 10 days. And it was an incredible success and caused a big wave of discussions where the politicians started asking the question, why isn't our city more green? We can do more about this. Look, this is like this 24 hours a day. And during the mornings, the kindergartens were brought into the area and they could run riot here. It was very, very popular. And today we have something like this as we're discussing which way to go forward. It's a possibility to talk to people in terms of citizens' engagement. This is obviously winter, there's no leaves. And a space next door, this is formerly a parking area right next to the cathedral. And the same architects worked with myself as well, so city architect and the politicians, to discuss what can we do with the space if it's not so traffic orientated. It's caused lots of discussions, and it's only a temporary. The whole idea is that it could be a way of finding out what we could do with it, try something else. And I think there's plans now to make something different, and I'm looking forward to see what comes along that way. Whilst we're waiting, as I mentioned earlier, this building site container area, very quirky, fantastic. It was a lot of fun, and people really liked it. And it was planned to make something a little bit more streamlined at the time when they did the master plan. So this quirkiness and the idea of the architects who were big talked with the council and the firm called Institute for X, who actually built many of these containers here, and designed a new type of shops, restaurants along this harbour front, introducing another scale, but they're built in burnt wood, cork, glass, timber, and thatch. And I mean, the sensory aspect of this whole area has just been uplifted. It's a very popular area now, and it's become a destination just to come and see what's going on, maybe have a bite to eat or a cup of coffee or a beer or something. But it's a way of making architecture interesting, the urban realm interesting as an attractor. Similarly, the seasonal aspects of urban lifestyle. Here, the parklets. I know Louisa and the academy, the City Space Architecture Academy, are working very much with these parklets and doing themes and workshops on this. I think it's a very important point and something we're going to work more and more with. Similarly, the 15 Mean City in Paris, this fantastic idea of removing the cars on the school streets, making it child friendly, all these different activities. You see the parents meeting there. it's a wonderful feeling. I sense it. I haven't seen it in flesh. Similarly, in Barcelona, the super blocks model, this whole idea of moving transport out, so 9 blocks can be actually become more people-centric and accessible for daily use. It's not without problems, I know, because what do you do with the 4 main streets? Because there's still the pollution and the noise and so forth in those streets. But there's a very good quality on these urban spaces. And finally, if someone here, one of my heroes, Jan Gale, still going strong, is an honorary professor at the local architect school in Aarhus, worked all his life studying the urban realm. And I think some of these projects here, the transformation of the Broadway Times Square, where they did bicycle strategies prototypes in 2007 to 2009, testing what would happen if we did this, remove the cars, made it more accessible, people friendly. Similarly here, the Columbus Circle, New York City, and Herald Square before the development. I mean, fantastic. And this is what happens after, when it's changed. Look at all the people here. The quality of the urban realm is increased. People feel free and relaxed. Similarly here, Times Square. Snuhete designed the final scheme, I believe, in a period between 2010 2017. But even major cities like New York City can reap the benefits of reimagining the urban realm. Similar example here in Montreal. The beauty of this is it's only here for temporary, but it's very high quality. And it feels very well designed, I think. And I think it's very important. If we think about the quality when we do these urban interventions, even though it's temporary, it can be moved somewhere else as well. Similarly here, Urban Bloom in Innsbruck, the old town, by Snuhete Architects again. I think it's very interesting that we can actually experiment more doing these ideas of temporary prototyping, because we can really rethink the way we see our urban realm. Why should it just be temporary? It could actually lead into something more permanent. And I would like to say thank you very much. I'm sorry I've taken 47 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for your lecture, which was very inspiring with so many examples and also focusing on how to properly design public space.
Yes, thank you.
Since this is a key part of what public space can be, if there is a proper understanding of the value of the space and a proper design for people to actually live, appropriate, and enjoy. I think this is also very relevant to the first part of your presentation when you were talking about the need for space,
Right.
which sometimes we actually don't see the space that it is available in our cities, but that probably is not used as a public space, as an opportunity to improve quality of life for everyone. Yes.
Yes, and it's a question of priorities, right?
Absolutely.
And I think when I was a city architect, we're talking to politicians, right? We have 32, I think, in Aarhus, and I think it's trying to encourage them to understand that we know people have to get to work. We know people have to deliver their children, and there's different times of day where there's a lot more activities taking place. But it is possible to prioritize somehow so that public transport can have more space somehow. But it's a big challenge to nudge people to stop using their car or reduce the amount of car usage or share cars, because a lot of people when I cycle to work in the morning, I have to stop at the traffic lights, and I sometimes count the number of cars coming in between the light changes. How many people sitting in the car? And maybe out of 20 cars, there's 2 cars with 2 people in. All the others are just 1 person. You know, and I think, you know, and they're going to park the car in a minute. So the car's not in use for 95% of their time. So it's a big political agenda going on here, I must say. We have to take that into account.
Well, yes, we also need what you were referring to, generosity, but also sensitivity to certain issues which are not, well, even if we actually point to proper design, it is not merely a design activity, because the design is used to improve living conditions and quality of life. So, because sometimes, you know, this activity of designing is perceived more as something related to architecture and architects, while instead it is related to everyone. Because
exactly, it's not necessarily what it looks like; it's what it actually does. You can make fundamental changes for people's lives. You know, by
yes, absolutely.
healthy and well-being. You know, the whole idea of integrating stormwater into the public realm and planting with roots and shading and so on, because, you know, the increased temperature in the summer, we need the shading to protect the citizens and children and what have you, and, you know, and reduce the heat island. And there's so many synergies to get hold of here. So many good things.
Yes. Well, I would like to invite now also Via on the stage. Brilliant. Also to see if there are some questions from the audience for you, Stephen.
Yes, absolutely. So I will read some audience questions. If somebody who's watching hasn't written their question yet, please do it now so that we can also read it out loud. So we have a question from our colleague, Sabnem, and I think this question works very well in the discussion that you were already having, because she is wondering about the political will and the community awareness building behind these design projects. Because, of course, we as designers cannot be the only running force behind it. And I think that in a more general discussion, this also talks about what responsibility do we have as urban professionals to do this sort of advocacy work with the communities or with the politicians or with the clients, to kind of show facts or information about what are the better solutions.
The public engagement is fundamental in all projects, and you mustn't get ahead of yourselves. I mean, it's important to get them on board very early. Citizens, in my experience, have felt often that they come in a bit too late. A design is already made, and it's not necessarily the best way forward. But this also takes time, and I've often discussed this with politicians around the world. You know, they may be voted in for 4 years, and many of these projects we talk about, infrastructure, urban space, they cost money, but it also takes time to do. So sometimes you have to sort of think in the bigger picture, think, well, maybe we're not going to get this finished in my term, but let's hope we can carry on with it afterwards. For example, the idea of the harbour project, that was designed in 1999. And that's a master plan which is going through changes as we speak, because things adapt. We have to adapt to the new situation. I showed some of the illustrations from Leon Cryer, you know, the amount of public space or semi-public space. I mean, we've gone through those phases in these 25 years, actually. So the final images I showed there for the new project are coming closer to, you know, what I call an ideal. But we've been building an aeroplane whilst we're flying. So we have to take on board criticism or trends which are coming through. I mean, the 5-minute city or the 15-minute city has become a kind of a strong idiom now. Obviously, you have to try and integrate many different functions together rather than splitting them up. So this takes time, and the public engagement meetings, we have to get the feedback. And one of the ideas behind tactical design or prototyping allows people to see a possibility which was not there before. And this is where us as designers have a possibility to do nudging, to get feedback, and maybe we make a mess of it. And that's okay. We find out it didn't work. But then again, it could give some fruit for thought and encourage the politicians who in the end make the decision. They say, well, we've tried it. It works very well. And the citizens are backing up on this. Let's do it. And then maybe we'll get voted in again. Being funny about it. It's just that there's a kind of a carrot at the end of the day, by doing these tests. I'm a big fan of it. And the temporary summer street, the change, we can adapt to the different times of year. One of my dreams was could we get people to stay in the urban realm for an hour more during the winter? Just to make a little bit more activity. What can we do? Light festivals in January. January is the worst month of the year. We've got no money. We're in debt after Christmas presents. Let's get out on the street, mix with people. Let's try and arrange some things going on in the urban realm, which are, kind of arranged or programmed by the architects, the urbanists, the landscape architects, together with the council staff members. There's a lot of talented people in the local councils who would dream of doing different projects if they get the opportunity. That's a long answer. So you've got to stop me, Louisa, because I could just go on and on and on.
No, I think we have another question for you.
Yes. Let's go to the next question. I'm sorry, I don't see the name of this person, sadly, but they are asking about incorporating people-centric design. And so from your experience working in Aarhus, the person is wondering, are there any policies specifically about this that promote people-centric public spaces in Aarhus or Denmark in general?
Yep, there are. I mean, the council itself, since just as I was leaving my term as city architect, were pushing very hard to make a whole department relating to citizen engagement. There's quite a big investment going on to get people on board early. I'm not sure if it's a national politic, but I know we have a national architecture policy, which is in the throes of being rewritten, which this is becoming a very important part of the strategy for any developments where you have to have citizen engagement. So it is becoming policy, and thank God for that, because we have to get good ideas from the citizens and stakeholders, of course, businesses. There's lots of different users which you have to get on board, and the focus groups on different types of projects, I know they do, and Rome wasn't built in a day. And I know there's citizen engagement meetings, walk around the city where the developments are taking place. There's some really interesting people talking about city development and fantastic consultants, as I mentioned. There's Gale and there's landscape architects and urbanists, Slett, Kuba, Big. Luckily there's some very good architects working with the council and civic engagement. Take it very seriously.
Well, yes, it's important. Yes, to reflect on policies, because what we are doing also with the Public Space Academy and also with the work that we are developing with city space architecture, we always hope to influence, policies and policymakers to integrate public space strategies into the development of new projects and initiatives. As you said, Stephen, putting public space as a priority. So if we actually frame a public space as a valuable instrument which is producing a lot of good outcomes in relation to environment, to mobility, to economy, and many more challenges that we currently have, then we will be able to produce much more effective outcomes for living communities. I think this is the ultimate goal for everyone engaged in public space.
Louisa, you had a summer school, I think in Bologna last summer. Yeah?
Yes.
Well, I mean, there's possibilities of doing these types of urban interventions during these types of schools, events, workshops, you know, getting people making things, getting engaged.
Yes.
And you know, when you're actually building things on the street, people stop up and ask, what are you doing? Oh, we're going to try and do this. And then some say, oh, can I help? You know.
No, this is exactly what happened when in September we built a one-day parklet
One day
on the street. Yeah, one-day parklet because we were celebrating Parking Day on the 20th of September. So we built this one-day parklet, and we also animated the parklet by you know, putting chairs, eating, drinking, talking, and having fun. So people were actually stopping by and approached us. Yes, so actually this is the best way to also teach people how to reimagine, you know, the space for other uses.
Oh, well done, Louisa. That sounds great. Right up my street.
No, it's always very interesting when you actually can reach, you know, people on the street, even, you know, strangers that do not know you, but are just willing to know what's going on, if this is temporary, if this is lasting, if they can use it, what kind of activities. People are always very much engaged when they see actually others, you know, doing and putting a lot of efforts and energies. So this is the best way to teach how to make public space.
I do this when I was teaching full time, making things at a scale 1-to-1 as a design project. And we built things in the urban realm together with the Aarhus Festival Week, big urban intervention with, you know, contractors on site and things. And it's a really good learning process for the students too. But perhaps we could get involved sometime in Bologna, do something together.
Of course, yes. You are welcome anytime to join us in Bologna. And of course, anytime we organize activities in Bologna, we welcome other participants, learners, and senior or early career professionals that are willing to support public space interventions in our neighborhood.
Very good.
Okay, I think we do not have other questions, right, Via? No. But this was really a very informative session. Thank you, Stephen, and we hope to have you again in future activities that we will organize. Well, if in Bologna, well, of course, better to meet in person, but you know, the Academy is also organizing many online activities. So we hope to have you again with us.
It would be a pleasure. I look forward to that.
Okay, so thank you again,
and
thank you again, and see you soon.
See you. Bye-bye. Lovely.
Bye.